You're listening to Don't IEP Alone with Special Education Advocate Lisa Lightner. For more information about Lisa, the IEP Toolkit, and more ways we can help you in your process, go to adayinourshoes.com. Now back to the show with your host, Lisa.
Hello and good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to Don't IEP Alone. I'm Lisa Lightner, my simple little podcast here about IEPs. So, going to try to be brief as usual so that you all can go about your day. But of course, what I want to talk about this week, and this will get published on Tuesday, assuming maybe by then that you've heard the news that the OSEP and OSERS offices have been pretty much decimated. So, the one thing that really bothers me about this, and I will put the link in the show notes, is that last year, right after the election, and I know I've mentioned this several times, but right after the election, I did a podcast episode with the lovely gentleman who was then Secretary Casey's Disability Policy Director. And when we did that recording, and it's brief, it's only like 25 minutes or something. When we did that, the presidential election results had been called, but Senator Casey's race was still being counted. His race was counted for, I want to say, about 2 weeks after the election, if memory serves. So we didn't know then that we were going to lose Senator Casey. We were still hopeful that he was going to be our senator, but, here we are. But we had talked about, hey, these are the election results, and what does that mean for disabled people and disabled children? And unfortunately, everything that this gentleman told us about is coming true. Because we had, and again, he's a policy wonk, right? It's his entire job to know policy and players, and he was well connected in DC and knew all the players and possibilities and understood policy at a much higher level than you and I. Even though I have a better than average citizens or layperson's understanding of it, there's still much higher levels. So, but I learned a lot the past 10 months, 11 months. But what he had said is this, because we were naively thinking as parents and citizens, well, you can't undo IDEA, it's this federal law. You can't undo ACA, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, the health care stuff. You can't undo all that. You can't abolish the U.S. Department of Ed because that was decided upon, by Congress, and you can't just undo that. And he had said to every single one of those concerns, no, but you can do a lot of things that weaken the agency and minimize its efficacy. Things like defunding programs. You can defund ACA. You can defund the U.S. Department of Ed. You can fire the employees and things like that. And so, of course, this is exactly what we're seeing. This government agency or this government shutdown was not an accident. It was not because, the parties couldn't agree in Congress and things like that. This was well planned out. This was done on purpose so that they could make the case for these firings. On Friday, the director of the OMB, which is one of the most powerful agencies in Washington and decides, how money is spent and all that, he sent out a tweet that said the RIFs have begun, meaning that, we're going to start firing people. And when someone like that sends out a tweet like that, it's not just being edgy or alarmist. It means hey, it's really happening. And so what we've learned is that the Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP, and OSERS, which is the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, All of those employees were fired, with the exception of some higher level executives. I do not understand the logic or strategy behind that, and I have not read the logic or strategy behind that. Since I've posted this on Facebook and on my site, I've had other people chime in and say, well, hey, this agency also fired all its people, and like the early childhood education people, the Center for Independent Living, like a couple others. And understand that at this point in time, there have been no official announcements, by the U.S. Department of Ed, by the federal government. There's nothing posted at this time on any of their websites or press releases, news releases, interviews, press conferences, anything like that, where they've actually stood up and said, hey, we're firing all these people. Besides that tweet, we don't have anything to go on to tell us what's happening, what's happened, and what is going to happen. So where we're getting our information, one example is union presidents. Some of the federal workers were unionized, and some of the union presidents have stood up and said, hey, by the way, this entire agency was fired on Friday. And that is where we're getting our information. So what does this mean for you, me, our families, our schools? Keep in mind, first of all, that, again, your IEP battles have always been fought at the state and local level. Other than firing an OCR complaint, you didn't really dispute or disagree with the federal government about your IEP. Your disagreements, your discussions, all of that has always taken place first at the school district level, and then if you filed for mediation or due process, it moved up to the state level. Very few of us complained or fought a battle at the federal level, right? Very few Supreme Court cases, very few federal court cases, federal appeals. In my 15 plus years of doing this, I have filed very few OCR complaints for, as a percentage of my clients. I don't know what the actual percentage is, but it's not that high. Okay. However, it's necessary to understand that federal level of protection is significant, and that many of us relied upon the guidance letters, the Dear Colleague letters, the explanations from OSEP to explain different things. Probably the one that affected all of us, and the one that is the most memorable, is going to be COVID, right? If you remember in those early days of COVID, when everybody was just sent home and it was like, hey, just go home and we're going to do this virtually. A lot of parents, and understandably so, were panicked and freaked out at hey, how's my kid going to get OT? How's my kid going to get PT? How's my kid going to get speech? How's my kid going to get his resource room instruction? And my kid can't learn virtually, and all those different things that happened. My kid won't wear a mask. If you remember, all the first few months of that was very chaotic until several weeks into it, OSEP came out with guidance and said, yeah, we're in a pandemic, but this is what we expect from schools. And it defined and outlined for schools what the expectations were, and what those expectations were, of course, were that our kids were still, yes, to receive FAPE during the pandemic as best that could be implemented. So OSEP matters. I have used, and in fact, I teach a course on it. I have a course module on it in Don't IEP Alone Academy. I have always taught parents to use those guidance letters, those dear colleague letters, and steal some of the language out of those letters in your own communication with the school district. Because why not use the language that OSEP has given us? You know, if OSEP is saying, hey, this is what's supposed to happen, why wouldn't you use that language in communication to your school if it wasn't happening for you? So, no, IDEA has not gone away. IDEA is still there. The people who enforce it and protect it and define it and explain it and fund it are gone. OSERS is also a big deal because they fund and provide and create a whole lot of stuff for the IEP transition process, the Office of Vocational Rehab, and things like that. So that's kind of gone. Not kind of gone. It is gone. This is kind of hard to talk about. I have a kid who's caught in the middle, who's in that 18 to 22 age, receiving vocational services at school, in transition programming at school, and that's gone. They also helped fund programs for disabled people, programs, guidance, things like that. The CIL, Center for Independent Living, that matters. So make no mistake, this is devastating. This is absolutely fucking devastating that it happened. There's no, I can sugarcoat it a little bit and say, yeah, sure, your disputes have always been at the state and local level, and they have. That's not untrue. But from a big picture look at this is absolutely devastating, because you can't just stand up in front of the American public 2 weeks ago and say, oh, autism is an epidemic, this is horrible, what's happening to autism, and all that. If they truly believe that, then why would they decimate everything special education related just, 2 weeks later? It demonstrates to us what the level of support is from this administration as far as disabled people. And to think otherwise at this point is delusional. I've deleted a couple of comments from my Facebook page, and like these dumbass people, oh, well, sometimes cuts hurt, but it's gonna get better. Like, you can't say it's gonna get better when the people who are there to oversee IDEA are gone. Like, there's nothing better about that. So I would expect that some states are going to see an influx in people moving, which is only going to put a further strain on those states that are doing special education well or better than the other states. I certainly acknowledge that being able to pick up and move is expensive and it's a privilege, and I'm not saying that lightly, but I absolutely would believe that if I had the means to do so, and I was living in a state that already was not that great at special ed, I certainly wouldn't expect it to get better without any federal oversight. And that's essentially what this is. There's no federal oversight for any of this stuff anymore. Like, who, if your state doesn't support it, like, well, then where do you go? Two more things that I want to point out before I hang up with you all today. One is that this is all a part of Project 2025. So for the people out there going, oh, this is unbelievable. Like, no, it's not unbelievable. It's completely believable. And they told us that they were going to do this. And they even put it in writing in the form of a 900-page manifesto and said that they were going to do this. So, a lot of us believed it when they said they were going to do this, and they're doing it. So y'all can take a seat with that. This is unbelievable. It's a part of Project 2025, which they said they were going to do. And at this point, no one in the Republican Party is denying being a part of Project 2025 anymore. So The other thing is this: as we lobby and advocate, as we should, keep calling, keep emailing, keep going to protests, right? There's big protests this weekend that we all should go to. Keep writing to people, keep donating as you are able to agencies and lobbying groups that support your disabled child. As you continue to do that, I also want you to remember this. The people in charge of this, largely white older men, very wealthy white older men, the men in charge of doing this have so much money that they could stop working today and never, ever, ever be poor, never, ever even be upper middle class, right? I mean, most of these men have more money than is really even possible to spend in one lifetime. They have so much money that they could easily retire today, never work again, and live a very, very comfortable life. You know, still with yachts and jets and vacation homes. And that kind of being my point. These folks could have a giant lakefront mansion, beachfront mansion, mountainside mansion, whatever is fun for you. Giant mansion in the middle of the forest, or in maybe a penthouse in a giant city, top of the world in New York City. These folks could buy that. They could focus on their kids and grandkids, and they could take up painting as a hobby, or travel the world, or spend time playing with their grandkids, or take up pickleball. I don't know. Learn how to cook. There are a zillion things that these folks could be doing for fun and leisure and enjoyment. And again, still die incredibly wealthy men. And instead, this is what they're choosing to do. They're choosing to make people suffer, inflict pain and suffering on people who they believe are lesser than them, and exert their power and influence over people by any means necessary. So just know that we're not dealing with a normal mindset. We're not dealing with a normal, empathetic, sympathetic human, the lived human experience. Whatever happened to these people along the way, I'm not sure. But to expect them to respond logically or sympathetically, empathetically, you saw it the other day with TV and CNN, and the woman's like, I'm a military wife, and like, my kid's gonna die if we don't have money for medicine. And the Speaker of the House just sat there like a fucking mannequin. Like nothing. Like, they don't care. They do not care. But there are still enough people in this country who do care, and there are still enough people in this country who are hurting and willing to fight back. And they're losing popularity quickly, very quickly. People are turning, because now it really is affecting everyone. People are not getting paychecks. People cannot afford food. They can't afford medicine. Right? Not only Democrats get disabled. Not only Democrats get autism, Down syndrome, any of those things, right? Epilepsy, ADHD, dyslexia, whatever. It's going to affect everybody. And it is affecting everybody, and people are turning. So keep calling, keep emailing, but also keep in mind that these are not normal people. So to try to appeal to their humanity, I don't know, is a route that I would take as a strategy. But I'm still going to reach out, because this is America, and our Constitution says one thing and they're doing another. So listen, I've rambled on now for 20 minutes, which is way longer than I like to talk, because I know people like to tune out. I will put some links in the show notes if you want more details and ideas on how to handle these changes. So have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to Don't IEP Alone with Special Education Advocate Lisa Lightner. We're so glad you've joined us and would love to connect with you outside of the show. For more information about Lisa, the IEP Toolkit, and more ways we can help you in your process, go to adayinourshoes.com. From self-care tips to common IEP mistakes, there's even more to explore. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast and subscribe to never miss an episode. Until next time, don't IEP alone, and you don't have to.